Hey everybody, welcome to the Beyond Sunday podcast, where we help take your faith beyond Sunday and into your everyday life. My name is Clayton. I'm the lead pastor here at Trinity New Life Church. Last week, Colin was sitting here, so I'm just making sure my microphone is at the right volume.
I had to turn him down a little bit.
Yeah. Hey, it's a youth guy. You want to turn him down a little bit.
A little bit. That's
as Jimbo Fisher used to say when he was a good football coach, I'd rather say whoa than giddy up.
There you go.
Beyond Sunday comes from TNLC, and it's for TNLC because we're going to take, like we said, the Sunday's message. We're going to dive deeper into it. That's Jill Branda, the executive director of Trinity New Life Church. I pointed at her if you're listening on audio, but you could be watching us on YouTube because you can like, subscribe, you can smash that like button.
You can.
You can follow us at Trinity New Life on Instagram.
Yep.
You can email us at
podcast@trinitynewlife.com if you have any questions, thoughts, concerns, opinions. I mean, my
right.
email
Sometimes we get,
inbox is full of all those things these days.
Sometimes we get questions related to what we talked about, and sometimes we just get a, hey, I was just thinking about this.
I think we're going to do a Ask Me Anything kind of
an
random
AMA?
Day where we
Guys,
just
would you like to have an AMA over the Christmas break?
Oh, that would be fun.
Start sending in all your randos. Your randos.
You're like, hey, I just was reading this and thought, what's happening
That's what we
here?
should do. We should do an AMA.
Yes.
I wish there was a better format to do that live because I really enjoy that. I don't know, maybe we're just not in the environment, but again, we complained last time that we didn't get enough questions and then we got a few, so
hey,
send us questions.
Send us
Let's
questions.
do an
We'll keep
AMA.
complaining.
Yeah, let's do an AMA. And we'll have that set as an evergreen episode to go up over the Christmas break.
Yeah.
These are all insider podcasting terms. AMA comes from the Reddit, where people go, hey, I'm a this, ask me anything. And then, Matt in the box.
Do they talk like that too when they post on Reddit?
No, that's from that old SNL skit
Oh.
where Jimmy Fallon was a radio host playing 9 different guys. And one of them was the man in the box. And it was called Matt in the box. And then the evergreen episode means that, like this, it's not evergreen. So
Nope.
in a couple weeks from now, this is not going to be as helpful for you to go back and listen to it. But
Time
now that we've dribbled
and
on,
space matter.
now that we've dribbled on for about 2 minutes and 23 seconds
Keep
about some maybe relevant things and non-relevant things.
I think it could be relevant.
Let's jump right into,
Well,
okay, so this
let's
was
do
the
this.
last week of our reappearing. We took a 1-week break. It was a 5-week series that took place over 6 weeks because we had Pastor Brent Gerard. It's actually Brent Gerard come in and preach a standalone message to us. And so we brought this to the close. We talked about, okay, once we've gotten to all these things and we've had a holy discontentment and we've been prepared and we've contended and we've put holy patterns in our lives, which it's not going to get accomplished in 5 or 6 weeks. That's a long-term thing. We're just kind of laying the groundwork of what we want to see in our lives.
Right.
What would it look like if revival came? And so as I started thinking about what the close of this message would look like, I was like,
What revival look
I was like, well, what am I going to preach? I was like, preach on revival. I'm like, what am I going to preach on revival? And then that's when the idea started coming of what would it look like if revival came now? So just to hit the highlights again, I think there's going to be salvation. And again, my caveat of I'm probably going to be wrong. And the reason I said that was because form has not been consistent over the history of revivals.
Nope.
But the desire, kind of the motivations of it, has been pretty similar over the history of revivals. So we talked about how there's probably going to be salvation. Evangelism will move from a fearful requirement to a joyful opportunity. Transformation, there will be undemanded and unforced pursuit of holiness and not permissibility. Miracles, there will be expressions of charisma, healing, and miracles. There'll be opposition. Nobody cheered at that one. Unity. I believe that justice and dignity will be present and unforced by legality. Pace and place will change, a counter pace and rhythm, which produces a greater joy and peace, reducing or eliminating our social anxiety. We've talked about that in a couple of our other messages about how the patterns that we're supposed to have in our lives and the relationships that we have in our life were built in to be the liver, the kidneys, the filter, to be able to reduce a lot of the social anxiety that rises. And then the last one I said was to raise a hallelujah that should be engaged, expressive worship. What kind of engaged? Who would be engaged? All of them. What kind of expressions? Probably all of them. And then we use that as a launching pad to go into communion and then singing. And then as we've been praying and fasting over this reappearing series, we're asking people to continue to be praying and fasting with us into our Faith for 5 series, believing that as we do our Christmas services, 6 of them on December 22nd and December 23rd, 3 on one day, 3 on the other.
Not 6 on both days.
Not 6 on both
Somebody
days.
asked me that. Yes. No.
Oh my gosh.
It's 3 services on Sunday night, 3 services on Monday night, 6 services
I mean,
total.
like at that, if you did 6, like at the end of it, we'd be like, "Oh, holy night, the stars are brightly shining."
You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
And that'd just be me, and I wouldn't even be on the microphone. I'd just be speaking and doing all that kind of stuff. But no Sunday morning services on December 22nd. 3 Christmas services that night, 3 Christmas services the next night. My suggestion, serve fully one night and then come and attend the next night. So I know some people are already looking forward to serving on 2 nights. Some people who are trying to serve on no nights, but that's impossible for how much we've got to get done.
Keep preaching that message right there.
Yeah, no, this is one of the best things that we do here at TNLC, one of our favorite things that we do, and we know it's a great outreach to the community. And actually, what the 2 nights allows is that's going to be the time where you're going to get to fully attend one and you're going to get to come to the other night. You can come to one early service and then attend. There's bathrooms you can change. You can get your hair done. You can get into your Christmas dress or, whatever you want to put on, Chris Monteith. That's totally fine. And so I don't even know where. Oh, so we're praying and fasting for that.
Right.
We're praying and fasting for the lost. We're doing our Faith for 5, where we're believing and praying for 5 people to come in. That's going to lead into the second week of January. Second week of January. We're going to do a whole week fast. We're going to join with our global Every Nation family in that fast. Going to end with an engaged service that we're hoping is going to be unlike anything we've ever done. Trying something new that we think is really going to press into the Spirit of God. So that's what we think revival is going to look like, and a lot of picture of what's coming up in the church calendar.
I mean,
what would you like to say?
We've been talking through this cycle of revivals, holy patterns, and contending into holy patterns was such a big part of this cycle. And exactly what you said at the top of the podcast of we took 5 weeks to go through each one of these, but this process takes more than 5 weeks. So the idea of we started with like this prayer and fasting holy pattern with this series, we don't want it to just end with the series. Like this series was not, oh yay, we've hit it. We have to continue this thing. So it's now that we're moving into this Advent season, we're moving into this Christmas season, like we're moving into it's an adjustment to, it's a turning from where we were. Again, I think this really goes back to the very beginning. Like, I still feel like there's a little bit of holy discontent. Now that we've created the holy discontent in you, we've talked all about this. Now let's start preparing. Let's start preparing our hearts to come to a Christmas service. And then at Christmas service, let's contend for the people who are coming to our Christmas service, these people who are not in faith. And through that contending, we're going to go into January where we're continuing this holy pattern that we've now had 10, 12, 13 weeks of prayer and fasting basically here at the church.
So, yeah.
Like 12, 13 weeks of a holy pattern of prayer and fasting that you've put in our lives. And let's see how these areas of revival really, and I'm not the person who's like 2020 is going to be like, we have to wait until January 1st, 2020 to do it.
Breakthrough.
But there is this idea of like, once we get, when we come through this prayer and fasting in January, like, well, now we've been doing the work for so many weeks. Let's believe for these things as we're going into these next sermon series and these next Sundays and these next weeks of things. And yes, volunteer to serve at one of our 6 Sunday services because we need you. But I do think that like for those of us who've been,
isn't it weird to
be interrupted by you? No, I'm used to that.
That's pretty normal for you.
Normal.
Isn't it weird? I'm not saying this is like a passive aggressive thing, but just from our experience and what our lives are like. Isn't it weird to think about only going to one service and going home?
Oh my gosh, yes. It's weird for my kids. And I don't think and Carla Gerard talked about this during our parent thing. I think I said this on the podcast last week with Colin even. Like my kids grew up sleeping on like church rows. So like Hannah got an email asking about serving and she didn't even tell me she got it. She put up the calendar, just wrote 6 services. I was like, are you serving all 6? And she goes, well, I'm going to be there anyways. I might as well serve all 6. I was like, I mean, you're not wrong, but no, it's weird. I can't, it's hard for me.
Feels incomplete.
It's hard for me to visit churches on a Sunday and not try to do something even. Like, it might be picking up bulletins on a chair to put them away as I'm walking out.
Yeah, when I visit churches, I'm like, they do like a meet and greet. I'm like, hi, how long have you been coming here?
Yes. Like,
people are like, oh, 2 weeks. How long have you? I'm like, 2 minutes. It just feels very incomplete.
Right. Well, and I'm the person that was not fighting. That's the bad terminology. But I was the person that was like, people are going to miss church on Sunday morning. we're not going to do church on Sunday morning. We're only doing night services. People are going to miss that.
They are, but they also are not the ones who have to sing and
right.
preach.
And
we talked about, guys, I can't even tell you
the number,
discussion,
yes,
the options,
5 hours of Christmas
the
service time discussion
of what was put out there.
And I do agree with our final decision. I'm very happy with these 6 services, but it's not because like I just like being at church. Like I like being there on Sunday mornings too. So,
and I think that each of these services are going to be a little smaller. Like last year with the 5 services, there's always 1 or 2 that's really big. I actually think that with the spreading out, maybe, who knows, I could be foolish. I'm not hoping that it's smaller, but I just mean like I think that there's so many that we can spread it out stuff a little bit and create this more intimate feel.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
There's a real heart of, not that we never do this, not that this hasn't been there already. We are not the flash for fun kind of like, you've heard this Christmas carol, now hear it with drums. Like, you've heard it slow, we're going to take it 3 times faster, which would be a real screw up because you can't take things 3 times faster. You can go twice as fast, 4 times as fast. We'd have to change the time signature to go 3 times as fast.
This is true.
But there's a real sense of worship. There's a real hope and desire for what's taking place around that. And it just does. It feels incomplete.
Yeah.
And maybe that's because we're here all Sunday, all the time. But I think CJ Johnson, who's in our discipleship group, he's like, it's my favorite thing when I serve. He goes, I get to hear all 3 messages. Like I feel like he's like, they're like different kind of, he's like, I like hearing all the ones, all the different things together, and I get the full thing, and it's not like we intentionally change the services for anybody. No. But
I think there's something to the idea of being able to come and serve for one night and being able to attend the other night that I think we're going to find our people really being able to enjoy the Christmas services in a new way. Like in the past when we've only had like last year we did 3 here at Challenger on Sunday night or was it Sunday night last year? I think it was Sunday night.
We did 2 Sunday morning at
2 Sunday night
Creek
and 3 Sunday night.
3 Sunday
so
night.
Our 3 Sunday night services, you're serving one, you're trying to attend one, you are doing the bathroom switch where you're changing for the pictures with the grandma and all things. And I think that there's a little bit of people are going to come this year and go, oh, so this is what Christmas at TNLC is like when you're attending like these services. I think exactly what you said. I think it's going to feel a little more intimate because people are going to have those moments of like they're coming to just celebrate the birth of a king. They're going to just come to engage in the message and worship in these moments and not have, because we're giving this moment of, I know with most of our teams we're asking them, will you serve Sunday or will you serve Monday? Like which night are you wanting to attend? Which night are you wanting to serve? And I think that's because I just from a church staffing point, I think that our people are going to really enjoy that option.
I mentioned this. I really felt this at the end of the first service that people needed to stay all day long and just, it's always funny when people are like, man, I just wish we could worship longer. I wish I could stay here longer. I'm like, unless you're in the 3rd service, you can stay here longer. I sing the same songs. I mean, I sing all the songs 3 times. The worship team, the music team sings them Lord knows how many times because they practice so diligently and they're prepared and they're locked in. Otherwise, we couldn't do it. That I get something out of it every single day. It does not become boring to sing the songs at another service. Like it doesn't become boring to, I mean, again, for those people who like, oh, I've already heard the message. Like for the people like, again, CJ Johnson who say this and people who sit in there, like I was asking, Kelly had to leave to take our new dog out. Little puppy, Bentley, had to take Bentley out. And so I sat down at the end of after communion. I looked at Colin. I said, 1st or 2nd for the podcast. And he's like, both good, but different, not sure. And I was like, okay, Kristen, which one for the podcast? And she's like, well, this one had this one, but this one had this one, and da-da-da. And I was like, okay. So Mason comes over to tell me, like, don't worry about the time. And I was like, thanks, bud. I never worry about the time. Like,
we know you don't worry about the time.
The reason we don't worry about the time is because we plan. And we weren't any longer than we normally were.
You weren't. Oh, no. the service wasn't any longer than we normally are. Your read was a little bit more than normal.
That was a little bit normal.
And because we had worship at the end, I think that made
Threw everybody off?
Yes.
But I knew internally
You felt comfortable
why I
with-
put the clock earlier.
Right.
Because if I put the clock later, I'd still do that overrun. Mason's like, hey, don't worry about the time. And I was like, don't worry, I wasn't. And I was like, first or second? He's like, I don't know. They're both different, but good. So even the people who are sitting there hearing it they're not looking at me going, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
I think there are times where you have to just ask yourself those questions and you go, well, my kid's going to be in children's church for 2 services. What's going to happen? Probably nothing bad. Yeah. We take our kids to school all day long. We take them to daycare all day long. We take them, and then when we have them in children's church for 2, we think they're going to melt down. And that seems strange.
It does.
That seems strange to me, to think that they can sustain being in school, they can sustain being over here when we've got different things taking place, ways for people to be helping, our leaders to be engaging. This is a wide-ranging podcast.
This is very I
also wanted to talk about Advent. We haven't talked about that because to go back to the holy patterns.
And I was going
to
to totally tell people all about your notes, because this week, for those people who like the insider perspective of your notes,
there's no notes.
There are no notes this week, and it was like one of those it's all one-liners on the thing. All it is the start of the story or the area that you wanted to go into.
Hey, spoiler alert! Like Jed Bartlett, if I put my hands in my pockets, it's not in my notes.
Right, exactly. It's this idea of I don't think people. I just thought that was such a tangible way of explaining this series to people when I read through your notes, because it was at this point in time, this idea of revival and where we've been seeing this cycle going has been something that we have been seeking and praying and hoping and believing for. That this point, it's no longer just. It's not something we had to be reminded. You did not need to be reminded of these things when you were preaching. You needed to know the scripture references that you were using, but you did not need to know because you knew exactly where. And that's exactly what you see in these notes. It was just like miracles with one line and then the chunk of scripture. And when I got them and I read through them, I was like, oh, this is going to be a good series or a good sermon. And I was really.
And the transformation thing about the mules and the mines, which is one of my favorite stories. And then I was like, well, the difference is that they didn't do that on Sunday and then go do this on Monday and go back to their work. I was like, that came into me in the middle of it. I was like, dang, that's really good. I got to remember that.
I'm
not saying dang to me.
I know, but you totally were up there, hashtag church history nerd, because you were like, let's talk revivals again. You're hitting all these things. And 3 times, first service, I wasn't even in the room. It was walking through and you said something. And I was like, wrong name. And then I came back through. I forget which one. You got it right the other 2 services because I listened for it.
Evan Roberts?
Yeah, but I don't think you said Evan Roberts. I think you said another name. But then you couldn't
I said John
remember.
Wesley. No, I said John Wesley initially when it came to the Sinner's Bench, the Warriors Bench.
Oh, and it was.
Then I went on to the Welsh Revival.
Maybe that's what it was. But then Charles Penham was the name you couldn't think of. All 3 services,
yes.
and I kept forgetting to tell you in between services because I was doing things.
Old racist
and I was like,
Charles
at
Penham.
some point, I was just gonna walk in the back of the sanctuary and be like, Charles Penham from the back, she's like, this guy's name, and I couldn't remember.
James Seymour. I got Agnes Osmond.
Yeah, I
remembered it was Chinese.
Yeah, you
played
did.
the piano.
Yeah, you did. So
even in 3rd service, got the little bit of Rosetta Stone backstory.
Oh, I missed that.
I got into that little that the reason that they were praying for the gift of tongues was they were praying for an Acts 2 gift, not the rest of the book of Acts in the New Testament, where in Acts chapter 2 they were speaking in other known languages, xenolalia.
Right.
And what happened for the rest of the book of Acts is glossolalia, speaking in an unknown language.
Yeah.
Because they thought Jesus was coming back. They thought it was the millennium turn. And they did not have time to go Rosetta Stone. And there are instances of people when they're speaking in tongues of speaking in xenolalia. We tell a story about that in Starting Point and whenever we do activations.
Yeah.
But so Advent, no, but there was a pattern for that because the Holy Discontent, you're saying this is going to take months and months. So now we're starting the Advent season. Now, again, let's give more church history and church history nerds.
Let's do it.
Advent is the 4 Sundays before Christmas. So yes, technically, that should be the 22nd, the 15th, the 8th, and the 1st. However, since we are not having Sunday morning services on the 22nd, we are going to be going the 24th of November,
24th, yep.
the 1st, the 8th, and the 15th. I don't need any emails telling me that that's not actually when Advent starts, Lisa
right.
Ryan. Okay, I know that.
It's the TNLC Advent.
It's TNLC Advent, but Advent isn't in the church calendar. It's the beginning of the church calendar because you just came off of what's called normal time. So it goes Advent into Christmas,
Yep.
Epiphany, Lent, Easter season, Pentecost, normal time. That's
literally
that's what it's
how
called.
it is.
It's called
yes.
normal time. It was called normal time. A great accessible book on this is called Ancient Future Time by Robert Weber. Ancient Future Time by Robert Weber.
I have not read that one.
Have you ever read any Robert Weber? Ancient Future Faith, Ancient
so.
Future Time, Ancient Future
Nope.
Worship? Oh my gosh. I'll have to let you borrow these, but Robert Weber was forecasting both the initial emergent movement and then where we find ourselves now in kind of the return to higher liturgy, return to like more communion, to following the liturgical calendar. Oh man. Ancient Future Faith was one of the more foundational, transformative books for me. Ancient Future Faith or Ancient Future Time is one of the reasons why we do, and Ancient Future Worship is one of the reasons why we do communion on a Sunday. Ancient Future Time is one of the reasons why we celebrate Advent, do Good Friday, and at times done Ash Wednesday, and we've tried to follow the liturgical calendar and some of those things. But Advent is in itself a season of anticipation and preparation. So even though we just kind of went through and talking about having anticipation, that's what Advent is as well. Advent is a season of anticipating Christ's second coming and then remembering what it meant that he already came the first time. And so that's a great season for us to be able to celebrate and remember those things. I don't know. I have other random thoughts, but I didn't prep any weird questions for you today.
You finished your coffee and you're like,
I
all
finished
right,
my coffee.
I'm
That's
done,
my second
y'all.
cup. I was up early taking Bentley on a walk.
The dog, all things. I think that
Kelly's like, this could be a new spiritual discipline for you. You get up and you pray as you walk. I'm like, the dog needs to walk better before I pray. Right now it's a podcasting discipline. Listen, somebody else think for me. I try to pray and jerked back and forth.
Oh, he's a puppy.
Yeah.
I think that since the podcast is called Beyond Sunday, I think that if anything, hopefully through this series, everybody who joined us either in person, watched our podcasts, listened to these podcasts, like that you don't feel like, I really hope people are like, I've hit revival, I'm here. I really hope that this is a process for you. I hope that this is something that
something else. Keep going.
This is something that you are able to take further, that you can take deeper. One of the questions that, I know that you're asking in your discipleship groups this week was this idea of the holy patterns that you've put in your life. What are the ones that you change? I challenge, like, what can I help hold?
To change?
Or what to change or to put into practice, I should say.
So which are the ones you've put into practice?
Or you might have changed your holy patterns.
Or
you might have adjusted your for our group, like some people adjusted like when they were doing things because they found that it wasn't as fruitful as if they could just adjust the time, but it had become a routine, so they were adjusting things. But I asked the question, like, what can I help hold you accountable to? Like, as a group, like, so if you're somebody who's like, I'm in this is where God has brought me in these weeks, I want to continue pushing on, make sure you're doing that. Make sure you're asking people, hold me accountable to this. Find somebody who can ask the harder questions of, are you still maintaining your holy pattern? Are you still contending? As we're going through this anticipation, as we're praying, have you already signed up for your prayer and fasting for the Faith for 5? Have you already put those things on your calendar so that you're not like, oh, I'll pick one later, like, no, do it now. My son was out there helping do the Faith for 5, and he said, somebody was like, I need to go pray about praying and fasting. And he was like, wait.
No, you don't.
What? And he was like, I don't think that's how that works. And I was like, Mom, I just don't. I'm like, welcome to listening to people in ministry sometimes. It's like, no, what you're saying does not make sense. Let's come back. And got him back to do these things. But get that on the calendar now.
What would, like, maybe the way to say that would be, I want to think about when I'm going to pray and fast. Like, I think it'd be hard pressed to believe that you would pray about it and God would go,
no.
Anthony, I do not want you to pray and fast. You will draw too close to me. Don't do it, Anthony. Like, I don't think that's happening. I gotta be honest. I just don't think that's happening.
Yeah. Anyways, excuses are excuses. Is that what you're saying? Like,
Man, there's just an over spiritualization of like some things where people are, we were joking about this of like 2020. What's the word of the Lord for 2020? Make disciples who change the world.
Yep.
But what's like the fresh word? One, we're working off of the English calendar, not the Hebraic calendar.
Yeah.
So this is probably not actually the
Actual beginning of the year.
beginning of the year. It's not a year of Jubilee. That was a couple years ago.
Yep. That's
So
7 years, so we got some time.
Nobody's ever like, oh, this is a year of trial. Everything's a year of breakthrough. Everything's a year of abundance. Everything's a year of blessing.
You get to the end of the year, you're like, that was a year of trial.
Everything's
What
a
was
year
that?
of double portion. Nothing's
Yeah.
ever this is one of those 7 lean years. Nobody ever gets that prophetic word.
Can I
Nobody ever
please?
has that.
No. I understand that. You crossed your fingers. Did you have something more
Oh,
importantly?
good. Yeah.
See?
So this was also something that just kind of came up in the message, but was something that made its appearance in every message, but at different places in the messages, was this idea that what this whole series has kind of been focusing on, this revival, or what we might say is, 2020, it's a year of breakthrough.
Mm-hmm.
Breakthrough is not the finish line.
Right.
Breakthrough is what you do to begin.
Yeah.
That's, you break up the concrete. Now you can start pulling. Now you can start doing all that stuff. So, if you feel like there's been breakthrough in areas, then you don't coast
Stop.
in that area.
No,
now you push harder into that
push
area.
into it.
So,
But there you go. There's our ramblings on the end of this series for the day. Like, I hope, and again, I hope nobody listens to this series and is like, oh, that was great, we're done and over with. But no, understand that this series was really a launch for what's coming up in the next, 4 to 6 weeks here at TNLC.
Home for the Holidays is our
Home
next
for the
series.
Holidays is our
Learning to love the people you live with. Learning to love the people you live with.
And we have that which brings in along with it Advent, and so we'll be celebrating Advent every Sunday beginning this upcoming week, and then we've got Christmas services, and then January comes around and we'll have our Every Nation week of prayer and fasting.
Yep.
And so over these next really 6-ish weeks, like this, it's been our prayer as a staff and as a leadership team that this series helps to just continue this in your life, that this is not, we're not ending this series and going, okay, that's all you ever needed to know about, contending for your faith or preparing yourself or putting holy patterns in. No, actually, you're going to hear more and more and more about that probably over the next several weeks, in the idea of like, this is something that we want to continually come back and remind that if you are going to believe for a revival, if you're going to believe for a breakthrough in things, then you have got to continually look at this cycle and see, how can I grow? How can I push in? How can I find those moments?
You got to press more and more. I think this is my favorite series we've ever done. And I think the closing worship in all the services was one of the best worship moments we've ever had. Sunday service, Engage, Christmas service, worship night, any of that combined, all of us in the front row were kind of looking next to each other, left and right, going, what's happening? What's going on? And I think that becomes the moment that you want to use as fuel rather than finish line.
Yeah.
That should be fuel, not finish line. So any other questions, any follow-ups that you've got from this series, from this podcast, from anything, you can email podcast@trinitynewlife.com. You can follow us on Instagram, Beyond Sunday. Nope. Not anymore.
At Trinity New Life.
At Trinity New Life. But coming up later on this week, we've got some NLX leadership podcast episodes. But have a wonderful day. Finger guns. Pew, pew.
Have a good one, everyone.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.